to go. Housing courts, authority to preside. No due process, what a mess. Superior Court must say yes. Love it.
Okay, but can you share them somehow so that
I don't have internet.
you don't have your phone?
No, I have my phone. I just don't have a cellular.
Okay.
It's the only way I actually stay disconnected
Well,
these
that's
days.
fine. I get it. But can somebody hold the sign?
Let me make sure this is going. Yeah.
Gotta get that sign.
Yeah, Betty didn't send me it.
She said she was sending it now. Hi. Good. Can I give you a sign?
Okay, here it is right here.
What are you guys doing?
We are protesting the fact that the housing court has no rules.
Oh.
The housing court has no rules.
Inconsistent housing court.
All right, we have sound. Okay, yeah, yours is the most important. So we are going to start with a couple of chants. I don't have it in front of me. Oh, I should have it in front of me.
What's that mean?
Not exactly sure.
Here, can I take a picture of your
This is about foreclosures and how
Okay, so
the
people are
housing
still
court
charging.
violates the rules.
The housing court is literally has suspended all rules for 4 years and are still evicting people who have no rights and are not getting hurt anymore.
Really? Oh.
Yes, really, it is shocking.
I was like,
Says people like
Yeah.
a landlord for 20 years and they let the tenants stay forever.
Yes, I hear
They
you.
what?
I was a landlord for 20 years, so they let the tenants stay in my house.
Oh, yeah.
They could stay.
Tenants get away with a lot of
Yeah, but
stuff.
when you own a house, the banks will rip you out and don't care. They'll
All
lie
right, but
on you.
guys,
Your tenants
let's
don't
try
pay
and stay
and they'll get
focused.
foreclosed, they'll throw you out.
Let's focus, okay?
So if your tenants don't pay you,
Yeah.
right,
Then I think
and you
they'll
can't pay the mortgage,
Yeah.
they'll foreclose the mortgage, they'll give
Oh, you got it.
I took a picture of it.
All right, here we go.
That takes 5 years as well, though.
So we're here today because the Massachusetts Alliance Against Predatory Lending had warned that we have a report coming out about the loss of all due process rights in the Massachusetts housing courts. Today we're proud to say that we've got at least a presentable version of the report, and we wanted to hold a press conference because things unfortunately have moved some since our initial press conference, in that if you are in a constitutional democracy, which I thought this was supposed to be, you're supposed to have, what's the problem? Oh, okay. A constitutional democracy, among other things, is supposed to promise you the right to due process. That is, that if you end up in a court, it's an actual court where you have an actual right to, for instance, know what evidence is being brought against you, or have a right to answer, or a right to defend, or a right to be heard. And if none of that happens, you're supposed to have a right to appeal. There's numerous other things that fall under due process. It's this basic concept that you have basic rights when you're in a court. But since COVID, the Massachusetts housing courts have suspended all, yes, all due process rules, not only the ones for eviction cases, but the eviction case rules are supposed to provide you with due process rules that belong to all of the civil side of our state courts. Those are also suspended. And this is not simply in theory. We have people here today who can tell you horrifying stories and just complete stripping of any pretense of having rights to a hearing or anything else. So, to start out, we thought we'd start with a little bit of energizing chanting here, given the weather. So, ho ho! Hey hey!
Have to go.
Go!
We started that one.
So let's try it again. Hey hey! Ho ho!
Fake court.
Courts have got to go! Hey hey! Ho ho! Fake courts have got to go! Hey hey! Ho ho! Fake courts have got to go! Hey hey! Ho ho! Fake courts have got to go!
No due process?
No due process! What a mess!
Superior Court must say yes!
So we've tried to transfer to Superior Court, and the Superior Court so far is not getting it, that they're the only court in the state, that court venue in the state, that is still providing due process rights to eviction defendants. They've got to say yes to taking our cases. No due process, what a mess! Superior Courts must say yes! Due process, what a mess! Superior Court must say yes! No due process, what a mess! Superior Court must say yes! Finally, it's time to call out the housing courts.
Housing courts, you can't hide. You suspend your authority to preside.
Housing courts, you can't hide. You suspended authority to preside. Housing courts, you can't hide. You suspended authority to preside. Housing courts, you can't hide. You suspended authority to preside. Housing court, you can't hide. You suspend authority to preside. Housing courts, you can't hide. You suspend authority to preside. All right, thank you. So, the Mass Alliance Against Predatory Lending, founded in 2008, has been supporting homeowners to fight for their homes for all of these years. Now, because foreclosures are done by supposed auction, although not one auction, to our knowledge, in the last 25 years has been held legally under the law in our state, people don't get a chance at court until evictions usually. Eviction court, of course, is primarily tenants and landlords. But we know, as the only organized force of self-represented defendants, what's going on in housing court. Apparently, even though it is published on the state's website at mass.gov, that the housing courts have suspended all due process rules, all due process rights, and they're not kidding, because they aren't giving them out. We are aware, and we're not sure why, other folks who practice in the housing courts, like legal services lawyers, don't notice that all rights are gone. Maybe they get treated nicer than the people who are there representing themselves. But it is unforgivable to be in supposedly the cradle of democracy and have entire court venues that are operating with no rights at all. So I'm going to give a couple other folks a chance. Did you get your thing? To say something about some specifics, and then I'll come back. Who's ready? You're not ready. Are you ready? All right, here we go.
This one right here?
Hi, my name is Sherry Stanley from Worcester. I've been in the housing court since 2017. The housing court totally ignored that I held title to my home. They were still using my ex-husband, which I got my home signed to me during a divorce through probate court. And housing court totally plowed me over and stripped me my rights, which is why we're here today. And still now I am in appeals court, and I have a stay, and they're giving me an eviction without me going to court. They just gave me an eviction, so I'll probably get an eviction notice soon, but they can't do that because I have a pending appeal. I tried going to Superior Court, and I'm still trying to get in. Housing court is trying to block that, which they don't have the authority at all, but they seem to be working with no due process right. So that's the position I'm in, and several other members from WAP. Yes, also, they've been using South Coast Moving Company for years now, and we have proof, videos, proof.
Sorry, we're back.
Sorry.
we're back.
We're back. I was saying that we have been trying to. Hi, I'm sorry, you guys. There's been a problem, but anyways, we've been trying to stop a illegal moving company South Coast, and we brought to the housing courts several evidence showing them that the videos, we have videos, pictures, affidavits, they're blocking, they don't want to hear it, that they're illegal, they don't have licenses, they're not storing our things, they're taking them and selling them or dumping them, and they're still allowing it. And also they're letting unlicensed constables take us from our homes, threatening us and actually putting their hands on us physically, and they're allowing it. They actually let an unlicensed constable speak under oath, saying he had a license, which he didn't, which WAF proved that he did not have a license in Fitchburg, and he is no longer allowed to work there. I have another member that would like to speak. Thank you.
Let me just add something to what she said. So Sherry specifically looked back at all the times that we've told the housing court judges that these warehouses are operating without licenses. And it's back to 2022, and we have at least 17 cases where the judge was shown that they literally are not on the licensed list for the state, and they literally are taking people's belongings, they've got photos, they've got everything. This is specifically the obligation under our state law. The court that does the supposed evicting is obligated to make sure that their, quote, process servers, the people who are serving you, are operating legally under the law, and they have to make sure that the warehouses that are being used legally. And maybe they were looking the other way, but once we gave them the evidence starting in 2022, they were in direct dereliction of their duty as a court to follow. Oh, what was that? Oh, written law. Yeah, maybe that. Thank you. Here's Silas Sanderson.
My name is Silas Sanderson. I'm from the steering committee, the Worcester Anti-Foreclosure. I'm often a witness and a frontliner when things happen. And I simply am shocked and horrified at what I'm seeing. Whatever words you want to use for them, they denied the access to the courtrooms. When we had the typical Zoom sessions, they've actually abruptly just simply cut it off and said that there was a technical issue. There's been no explanation given as to what happened when we were locked out of public meeting. I have witnessed this personally when judges refuse to give even a hearing to people before a physical eviction, even when they have given the court evidence that the constables that they were trying to use were untrained and had new use of force requirements. Could literally kill someone if it becomes that. There it is, another George Floyd in the city of Worcester again, and have no certification for threatening of physical removal of people. We can't allow folks to be in public positions with that authority. When you're given the evidence of all the evidence in the illegal operating warehouse, South Coast, moving in stores. I've seen the adult children be completely denied any right to hear, to be heard. They physically are removed from the only home they've had ever known. I've seen constables and sheriff call and coordinate with the supposedly neutral parties, including the clerk magistrate of the Worcester Court. I've seen people struggle with whether to violate doctor's orders and literally risk their lives with the stress of going to court because they're afraid that having yes, because they were afraid they were going to be physically removed from their homes. That's right. They were in court and they were taken out in an ambulance.
They still let the hearing go on.
Yeah, right. Okay, pardon a minute while I keep here. I just want to make sure we cover everything. I've been an adult. I've seen adult children be completely denied any right to be heard at all before. Okay. I've also. I'm trying to catch up here. Okay. All right. I think I've said enough at this point. Thank you. Thanks for listening.
So we're going to continue this press conference in about 10 minutes up at the church, but we're literally all shivering and it's too cold to stay out here. So please stay on the line. There are folks who will keep the Zoom going while we move our physical location. Okay? Ho ho! Hey hey! Ho ho! Fake courts have got to go! Hey hey! Ho ho! Fake courts have got to go! Hey hey! Ho ho! Fake courts have got to go! Hey hey! Ho ho! Fake courts have got to go! Hey hey! Ho ho! Fake courts have got to go! Hey hey! Ho ho! Fake courts have got to go! Yes. No due process.
What a mess.
Superior Court must say yes. No due process.
What a mess.
Superior Court must say yes. All right, and the last one. Housing Court, you can't hide. You suspended the authority of presiding. Where's the connector?
You get the mic?
Where's the connector?
Remote. Is in the car. It was there. It's in
Where's
the car.
the
Where's your car? Have to go get it. It's in the car.
We can hear you. We
All right,
just
we're
can't see
fine.
you.
Okay, we're not going to worry about it.
We don't need that.
Okay, so welcome back. I do want to make sure that we have time for questions from anybody who has questions, but we still have more stories to tell. The background here, of course, is that for years people have been trying to get judges to listen to the real backstory on all of these illegal foreclosures. And we found that when people went to defend themselves, because homeowners overwhelmingly, like tenants in evictions, are not represented by lawyers, that they couldn't get heard and taken seriously the way lawyers are. Now that in and of itself is a due process violation. But what turned up when people started working together was beginning to see patterns of things that were clearly illegal. For instance, since 2012, and we thought this started in 2015 or 16, the bank lawyers have been illegally inserting documents at the very beginning of the case from the registries of deeds, not serving them on the homeowner defendants. Now, it is a fundamental due process right that you have a right to know the evidence against you, right? This is like as fundamental as anything else. And folks found that they were not getting allowed to have access to transcripts to be able to appeal. They were seeing delays, completely illegal delays on getting, as I said, transcripts and other rights when they were indigent, and also they were being denied any kind of what's called a reasonable accommodation when they had a health or disability reason why they couldn't go to a hearing. We had a guy who went in and complained because the bank's lawyer had not given him his due process rights, and the bank's lawyer said, "Oh, I need to postpone because we didn't plan for Christmas and the winter holidays, and I'm not ready." And the judge postponed it. So we have people literally in a place where they've got high blood pressure, they've been told doing anything stressful could lead to an immediate stroke and die, and the housing courts have said, nope, you have to show up, and if you die, that's your problem. And then our folks are in the position of choosing between two unalienable rights, their right to their life or their right to their home. So this led to eventually it was 46 homeowners petitioned the top court in Massachusetts, the Massachusetts Supreme Judicial Court, saying you've got to tell the Central Housing Court to act legally. And The Massachusetts Supreme Judicial Court, we refer to as SJC, actually told the Central Housing Court they are right on all of these range of things they've said that you have to do correctly, that you're not doing correctly, except one thing. They denied us. But they denied it, they gave everything else. Equal rights, if you have a disability, you're supposed to get a reasonable accommodation so that you can prosecute your case. And they reaffirmed that no one is supposed to be slipping evidence as a plaintiff into the beginning of a case when it's documents they're not allowed to use to commence the case. In our cases, adding these foreclosure deeds and all these other illegal, invalid documents. But the homeowners don't know they're there, so they never defend against them. And then the housing courts act like, oh, well, you've conceded all of these things. And our people are standing there going, I haven't had an opportunity to address any of this. How could I have conceded it? Well, because the judges are letting all this evidence come in at the beginning of a case that's never served on the defendants. So, having won that, you would think, coming back to the housing courts, that those decisions from our top court, the Massachusetts Supreme Judicial Court, would get implemented. Instead, things have gotten much, much worse. And when COVID came along and they had an excuse to suspend all, and I'm not talking about some, I'm saying all due process rights, they went ahead and did it. That was their excuse for about, 7.5 months. But they have continued to suspend those rights for another 3.5 years and counting, and it is listed on the website for the government that it is an indefinite suspension. So we are seeing more evictions right now, orders allowing someone to carry out an eviction than in the entire history, as far as we know, many, many decades of the housing courts. To give you a sense, let me see if I can succeed in pulling this up here. Esther, are you ready? So we are witnessing, and Esther's going to give you some examples, the fact that people are no longer being served properly to start an eviction case. They are being denied the most fundamental evidence, even when it's on the, supposedly on the court docket online and available, and are being denied fundamental constitutional right to a public hearing where you have witnesses. And why don't you go ahead and I will find the dashboard after this.
Okay, my name is Dr. Esther Bako.
Maybe you need the mic.
This.
Well, it's not plugged in right now. She's
okay. So my name is Dr. Esther Bako, and I live in Grafton area, Worcester County. I am there because I am taking care of my brain-injured, disabled, wheelchair-bound brother. So I'm living in his house. So for some reason, I don't know, somebody came claiming that they had foreclosed on the house, which is not true. And they went to court to start the process of eviction. And for about 5 months into the case, I researched the person who was coming to serve us. He would come armed with a gun, and he would say things to me and try to get into the house. And so I started researching him because I could see his names on the letters that he deposited. And then 5 months into the case, I realized that he was not licensed to serve us. So I raised the issue in court, and I said that this guy here is threatening us, is harassing us with a gun, and driving into our property with cars that have no number plates, and he is dressed like a really bad guy. And when I raised that matter in court, The day that I did, that night, the lawyer from the other side put in what I would call an emergency motion to make this guy a special processor. So overnight, by the next day, the clerk made him a special processor. But now the problem was, I don't know whether this is the correct English word, but it was in retrospect. It was supposed to sanitize this guy from the illegitimate serving that he had already done. And then the court allowed him kind of close the eyes and let him go on as if, now by making him special server at this point, as if he had been special server from the beginning. So I asked the court to dismiss the case because of that, and the attorney from the other side said, no, don't dismiss it, just give me a chance to serve them again. So she served us, but the case never began. You know, it just continued from where it was. So I realized that there was no due process, and I needed to remove ourselves as a matter of right. So we removed ourselves to Superior Court. Grace, I don't know how much of this I can talk.
That part of it, we don't need to go farther on, but if you wanted to tell them about trying to get the documents, the evidence that was put in the court.
Yes. So in one of the instances, the reason why I can't tell the whole story is because it is still in front of a judge somehow. So the plaintiff attorney filed some exhibit, but those exhibits, about 7 of them, they were restricted from our access. We couldn't see them. But we are supposed to come in court very soon and defend ourselves on things that we can't see. So I walked there to the court and asked that I be given those copies of the things that had been restricted, and even the other clerks themselves couldn't access them. They had to go to the big clerk to request that he does something for us to get the exhibit. And actually, I got them from the magistrate clerk himself. He's the one who somehow opened whatever it was, printed, and gave them to me. So I asked that I be allowed more time to look at them and process. So I have to research. I research from everywhere, from my friends here, from the Bible, from any place. So I needed time. And I was not allowed time. I was supposed to come into court and defend myself on things that I had not seen.
Then you have to tell them about putting on the Zoom and not being allowed.
Okay. When I realized there is no due process, I thought I needed my friends to come and sit with me and listen to what was happening, because I thought this is a matter of public interest. And I wrote a motion asking the judge, can you open up this room so that my friends can come and support me? And the answer was no.
Oh, dear God. Thank you.
Okay.
The stories unfortunately go on and on. Esther was one of 3 who literally had court hearings scheduled, arranged for people to be there, including in one case the media, and found themselves, when the time came, everybody was blocked out of the hearing. So, this is one of the emblems of a dictatorship, of fascism, is closed courts, where judges can do whatever they want, say whatever they want, order whatever they want, take all your rights away, and you have no visibility, no recourse, no witnesses to what's been done. Literally one time I was rushing to the court to be at the hearing and went to open the door of the courtroom they usually use. It was locked. I went to the second courtroom that sometimes they use, and the clerks told me, oh, it hasn't started yet. And I was like, yeah, but I went to open the door and it was locked. And then we found out that the hearing was over. So the clerks were wrong, and we had been locked out. The same hearing, the media had tried to come in on Zoom, they had been blocked. And numerous of the other supporters, what they were blocked from was that this woman's court case, her adult daughter and her older father have never been added to the court case. But they were being ordered to be evicted from the home with no right to have ever been heard, ever had notice, ever had a say, ever been able to defend, ever had an opportunity to appeal or anything. And that was what was supposed to be heard that day from the adult daughter, that she was asking to be joined to the case and be given all of her rights. No wonder they didn't want the media there. So we all filed and complained that the hearing should be rescheduled and that nothing should have come of it. Instead, they allowed they allowed an eviction order to be served on the household. So two adults who they know are there, who they know they've denied all right to any court hearing at all, are in the house to be evicted. On the advice, actually, of one of the homeowner activists who's with us today, the one person, the mother, who had been named, left the house, leased up, moved out, and served on the sheriff that she had done so that no one else would be able to be evicted on an order that only named her. The whole household was evicted. They used the warehouse that we talked about before, South Coast. At least one truckload of all of their belongings is still in the wind. It's all been stolen, including personal identification, passports, will, deeds to property, and numerous valuables are still in the wind, and it's been 4 months. And the housing court has been warned that that's what these people do. When they got the hearing that was supposed to be the rehearing for the public hearing that was never public, the clerk magistrate lied in court and said that the court had not been locked. We were there as witnesses, prepared to be sworn in and tell the truth about what happened, but we were blocked from being sworn in. And the lawyer for the plaintiff literally said that the woman whose case this was had been in the courtroom that day. She wasn't, we know. So they lied their way out of giving the public hearing that was never given. And I don't use the word lie lightly, but it's where we are. And there's been another example out in Western Housing Court. We've got people who've been evicted by, as beautifully stated earlier, these supposed constables who have no authority. With the Police Reform Act, they are required to have police training so that if they are going to physically put their hands on you, they wouldn't by mistake kill you like happened with George Floyd. That was not a mistake. The upshot of it is that we now have people who are terrified of the physical eviction process, knowing that they could be seriously, permanently harmed by someone who doesn't have the training to touch them, threatening to do exactly that. And they know enough to know the warehouses that we're dealing with are not licensed, are operating illegally, destroying people's belongings, stealing their valuables. And so now you get an extra threat. You not only get a physical warning that you might, be moved out of your home, but you now know you might also be permanently disabled and lose all of your possessions. So the threat has become far more serious because everybody is being allowed to operate illegally and endangering people's lives to do so. And it is literally the obligation of housing court judges, written into statute, that they are the ones responsible for monitoring all of this. And I was intervening in a case in Western Mass and showed the judge that the notice to evict in that case didn't even mention that they could physically touch you and physically remove you, and it's a due process notice that you should have that information. And the judge went, oh, I've been sitting on the bench for 13 years and I never noticed that. Well, the reason they never noticed it is because legally they're obligated to get copies of all of these 48-hour notices that are written by constables and sheriffs, filed into the case before the physical eviction time, and the judges don't make sure it happens. In fact, the return of service that they have to do later, we have dozens of them. None of them are filled out. They just turn in a blank piece of paper, don't tell anybody what happened, and the judges have been looking the other way. We can prove it for at least 4 years, but they may have been doing this for a lot longer. We are dealing with no rights, no rules, and they've suspended them indefinitely, and the only court venue in our state that still gives you your due process rights in an eviction case is Superior Court. I don't know if anybody on the Zoom wants to add anything, or anybody here has specific examples. No, we're okay. Anybody? Yeah?
Worcester Constables?
Sure. So we're talking about the housing court not enforcing its job.
Okay. More about the Worcester Constable situation. It's okay. Housing court not doing its job. So one of the instances was someone was one of the homeowners and someone who was protesting. Who were there lawfully were arrested by. The paperwork actually says that the Worcester Police Department did the arrest, but the Worcester Police Department handed handcuffs to the constables who put them on the people. And this entire time, the Worcester police officers who were there to preserve the peace were reprimanding the procedure and methodology and the way the constables were moving them. They said like 3 or 4 different times that these people don't know what they're doing. At the end, they said this is a complete shit show. The constables are harmful, and at the end of that day, the eviction wasn't even allowed because there was a stay in court. But the resisting arrest charge and it wasn't a trespassing, but there was a second charge. Those charges people had to go through the legal process of fighting a resisting arrest charge for an arrest that was never legal in the first place. And the court threw out one of these, anyways, the records are all over the place, and the courts they don't care what does and doesn't exist.
The backstory on that, yes, thank you. The backstory on that that's really important is that starting in 2022, for the first time to our knowledge ever, the Housing Court has occasionally given out orders saying that we no longer have our First Amendment rights to assemble, to associate, to speak freely, to protest, or to work together to redress grievances. The situation that David just described came out of one of those orders, making it appear that we are without rights with what we're doing, and therefore it is okay for the police to assist in an illegal project to deny us our right to associate, assemble, speak freely, protest, or work together to redress the clear illegal activities of these constables and moving companies. So that's how come the situation David just described occurred. Luckily, those kinds of orders haven't been given out that often, but it is outrageous. And the previous chief of police in Worcester, Chief Sergeant, I had met with him, I think in 2017, to discuss the issues of people being allowed to live safely in their home until the time and date of a physical eviction, when the courts were beginning to act like you stopped having rights before they even physically removed you, which is not the way our laws work. When I went to meet with him, he kept referring to our opposition. And to me, I thought opposition, that means plaintiffs. But it became clear as our conversation continued that that was not who he was talking about. So I eventually said to him, you said opposition, who do you mean? He said, oh, the clerk magistrate and the chief judge of the housing court, of course. And I'm sitting there going, of course, the neutral judge and the neutral clerk magistrate? How do you know that? And he said to me that within a couple of months of when he was promoted to the chief of police in Worcester, and I should state that I wrote this all up and sent it to him, and he did not disavow any of it. So I am allowed to tell this story. He had been in the courthouse on something else and gotten cornered by the clerk magistrate and the chief judge, and they were demanding of him that he clear the supporters or witnesses or protesters off of the property before people are evicted. And he said, Grace, it's a clear First Amendment violation. Don't worry about it. Our police force will never be involved in something like that, so don't worry about it. But what I was worried about is that we have a chief judge, no longer there now, she's now the chief judge of the Housing Court Division for the entire state, and a clerk magistrate who were planning in advance to strip defendants presently in front of the court of their rights if the case went against defendants, and of First Amendment rights. So your due process rights to court and everything that's supposed to happen in terms of notice, including the people who don't get any notice at all now and get evicted, are under the 5th and 14th Amendment of the Constitution, and apparently we've lost the First Amendment of the Constitution as well in the housing courts of Massachusetts. The time has more than come for everybody in power in a position to make any difference here to step in and shut down this process and move everybody to a court where you will have an even-handed judge, even-handed clerks, and actual due process rights. That's all we're asking for, because we thought our rights in a constitutional democracy. Anybody have a question? Y'all are awesome. So,
Jay, it's a question.
Yes, go ahead.
Oh, Grace, I was just curious why Superior Court was a better venue for title controversies as opposed to housing court.
Yeah, so that's part of the story, right, that we didn't cover. The report that we're putting out has 40 sections, and so there's only so much we could cover in one press conference. But part of the reason that housing court probably has been unhappy with our part of the defendants that they see is because, as I said at the beginning of the press conference, for a foreclosure in Massachusetts, they're usually done by auction, which means you don't get your day in court, even though under our laws, you're supposed to get a day in court within 10 days, where the party that claims to have foreclosed has to swear to the veracity of everything they did all the way back to the origination of the mortgage. We don't get those. So our people usually end up in eviction cases, and that court is not authorized and is not supposed to address if there's a real fight over the title to the property. They don't have authority to do that. They only have authority to sort out who lives in the property or the conditions in the property, what's called occupancy. So we've been fighting with the fact that we should be in Superior Court anyway, because this is both a fight over the possession of the property and a fight over the title. The reason now that we're saying we and everybody else who's facing an eviction, including the majority of the people in housing court for evictions, in other words, traditional tenants, is because there are no due process rules. That includes, shockingly, not only these closed hearings with no media, no witnesses, no nothing, but we just had a judge, chief judge, in one of the sections, one of the geographic sections of the Housing Court literally reversed the explicit wording of a Massachusetts Supreme Judicial Court decision in the case that had come back down to his court. He's literally saying the words of the SJC decision literally says they are vacating the judgment, in this case for possession, not money, possession. And he said that their decision did not say that, and that the previous judgment still stood, and that he could evict, but the court program the computer won't let them issue an out-of-date execution. That is, they have a year to get it, or they can't get it. So the judgment in this case was like 4 years earlier. So the clerk obliged the judge without permission and entered a new judgment so that the programming in the court computer system would issue an execution even though it is many years past the statute of limitations to issue that execution. They got back in court because our folks timely appealed that judgment, and as you heard earlier, when you're in the higher courts, they cannot evict anybody, they have to stay any execution. And so they ended up back in court, and the judge said, why is there a new judgment here? And he looked at the court clerk and said, why did you enter a new judgment? I didn't enter a new judgment. I'm saying the old judgment that was not vacated by the Massachusetts Supreme Judicial Court was to stand. And the clerks went, oh gee, sorry, we didn't mean to do that. But then they didn't get rid of it, because if they had, then the eviction execution could not have issued, because the court computer will not print it out. So now we have somebody with a top decision from our top court vacating the judgment, being denied that decision by the chief housing court judge in his section, and having an execution given out past the statute of limitations because they manipulated the court computer system to allow it to issue. There's no way to describe the insanity unless you have the specifics, and there are way too many specifics. But literally, even a decision from our top court in our state is meaningless in the housing courts of Massachusetts. So the report will be in everybody's hands in the next 24 hours. And we are asking, among other things, that the superior courts do the right thing and give people the right to have their cases in superior court, starting from when they stopped having due process rights, which in most of these cases is going to be before the case ever began, and to give people a real hearing and real rights in a court with due process. It's our constitutional, for some of us, birthright, for some of us, people who chose to take citizenship in this country, certainly expecting the minimum of due process rights. Is there any other questions? Because we're over time. Okay. Seeing none, you're all awesome. Thank you for joining us. Thank you all for speaking and coming and supporting. And as we are now saying, hey, hey, ho, ho, fake courts have got to go. Hey, hey, ho, ho, fake courts have got to go. And housing court, you can't hide. You suspended your authority to preside. Housing court, you can't hide. You suspended your authority to preside. And due process. No due process? What a mess. Superior courts, you need to say yes. Thank you.
Recording stopped.
Be well all.